Welcome to Sober.Coffee, a weekly coffee chat sharing experience, strength, and hope for anyone on the sober road to recovery. You can download Sober.Coffee weekly on all podcast platforms and check us out on Instagram at Sober.Coffee Podcast and on Twitter at Sober.Coffee Pod. To learn more about us and to help support these sessions, visit online at Sober.Coffee. Here are your hosts, two guys on their own path to recovery, Mike and Glenn. Let's join them at the coffee shop.
Mikey.
Glenn.
Good morning, man. Hey, thanks for jumping in and joining for another cup of coffee today.
Yeah, I'm excited to see you again. Hope everybody out in all our coffee mates are doing good.
Yeah, starting to connect with them, starting to get some good insights of other folks' stories as they walk on their sober path to recovery and digging the steps, walking through the steps.
Yeah, walking through the steps. I mean, it's there's so many elements to this program, and I tend to overcomplicate them, but they're really quite simple. And working the steps is obviously, has worked for me. And so, I love talking about them because they're part of my life.
Well, let's dig in. Let's talk about step 4, right? So step 4 is made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. It is searching and fearless.
Yeah. So there's a couple words in there that already tighten me up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think there's two things. The two words that jumped off of me, and they're read often as we introduce the steps from the big book. I think, if I had to guess, it's on page 58, 59, something like that. And, the paragraph that starts, rarely have we seen. And they talk about, do a fearless and searching moral inventory of yourself, right? And so I heard it on paper, but but it wasn't part of my practical application until my sponsor said, okay, after we sat on steps 1, 2, and 3, and he really felt that I had a foundation to move forward on, he embarked me on step 4. And I thought, okay, this can't be too hard, right? But here's a couple of facts that I had to come to grips with. Number one, I had almost 60 years of facts that I had to get into some kind of order, something I could get my arms around, and he told me wisely that I needed to take that searching and fearless moral inventory of myself and don't just hone in on all the bad things, right?
Well, it's funny because I looked at it, when I first saw that, being in business, I'm probably really good at self-promotion, right? So when you talk about inventory, it's usually a positive thing, mm-hmm. right? And I think about all the great things I've done in my life and, all the accolades and but I quickly found out that that's not what all this is about, right?
Right.
Especially when you put that word moral in there, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's a whole nother level of conversation.
Well, it's funny. I looked at it the exact opposite because I love, you and I are so similar, mm-hmm. But then the beauty of any relationship is there's also differences. Mm-hmm. For me, I focused in on the negative stuff. Oh my goodness! At first glance, you would have thought my life was a horror story and just a disaster, and it wasn't. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I got married, I had kids, I took vacations. My life wasn't a complete shit show. I just mentally wasn't in a good place when all was said and done. So my sponsor kicks me off, and Glenn, you're gonna love this. He tells me, he says, "All right, first of all," he says, "I want you to go buy a notebook, right, and a pen, and don't do this on a spreadsheet. I want it in a notebook and a pen, and I want you to start writing."
He's one of those guys.
Yeah. So you know what I did? I went home, and I started a Google Doc, and I put it on my Google Drive, mm-hmm. and I named it Moral Inventory. And it was up for the world to see, and my fingers started typing in, right? Everything my sponsor told me not to do, I did. And so
you knew better.
Yeah. Oh, because I knew better.
Yep.
So he checked in with me about a week later, and he said, "How's it going?" And I said, "It's going." And he checked in a week later, and he said, "How's it going?" And I said, "It's going." Checked in the third week, said the same thing, and he said, "You're not writing this stuff down, are you?"
In fact, you probably haven't typed a thing in the Google Doc either.
That's right.
It's going great, man.
I said, "How did you know that?" For me, it was like a deer in the headlights. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what direction to take, and I certainly wasn't feeling it. I was adding line items to my Google Doc, but I wasn't owning it, Glenn. I wasn't feeling it. It was a sentence, a typed sentence that meant nothing to me. I was just putting placeholders into it. By week 4, I abandoned my way, and I listened to his suggestion, and I started writing down my inventory. And I anyway took things sequentially. So I started out from birth and moved all the way to my 59th year. And
did they have enough storage on Google to put all that stuff down? Or
I had long abandoned my Google approach, and I went with a big fat spiral. So yes. Nice. So yeah, I started writing stuff down, and at first the process, the exercise for me, I was disengaged with it. They were just words on a piece of paper. But something ultimately happened, Glenn, and the words I started feeling the words. I started feeling the emotion. I started feeling the pain. When my sponsor would check in with me after a week and say, "How's it going?" I would say, "Not so good. This week really kind of sucked. I was at a place in my inventory that was quite painful."
All right, so let's dig in here. I've never heard your entire 4th step story, but we're going to hear it now. From my perspective, my 4th step was a joke. I don't have a real meaningful 4th step story. Every rehab I was in, you had to do a 4th and 5th step before you got out, right? So, I was trying to impress everybody. I'd have 30-page, 4 steps. I was just trying to be the model student, and so by the time I really did one with my sponsor, it was kind of anticlimactic, right? And I didn't fear it because I had done it so many times. But no, I never won awards. And yes, I did mine on a laptop, and yes, I had it triple password protected. That's why I just shirk as soon as somebody says a notebook, because writing things down where somebody might get their hands on that notebook, hey, but so there's folks that I know in the program, guys that I work with, that are scared to death about step 4.
But you know what, Glenn? I was scared to death about going back to drinking, going back to where I was.
Wow, that's powerful, man.
Here's a sentence.
That's called at any length, right?
That's exactly what I just jotted down.
Well,
I was willing to go. Here's what my sponsor told me. My sponsor told me, "You're going to do this step, and you're going to be fearless and thorough, and you're going to do it one time in your life." That was his approach. You're going to do it right. You're going to do it thorough, and you're never going to drink over this stuff again. And I loved that sentence structure. You're never going to drink over this shit again. That meant something to me. And so that was my motive to doing this. It took me just to write the issues down and with the columns and applying what my role to each one of these activities. I parked on step 4 for 5 months. 5 months, Glenn.
Wow.
Yeah, I've heard other sponsors. I've heard other sponsees. Look, I don't know that it requires 5 months. I'm just telling you my personal experience.
Yeah, I hear people, hey, just get through it, right? You can always go back and do another one. I like you. So I'm not sure what the right way to do it is, but doing one is definitely the right way.
Yep.
But I like do it comprehensive, put everything you've got into it, do it right the first time. That way things aren't going to sneak up, right? Things aren't going to percolate. Now, I've realized, through the ones I did, and I mean, as I work with others and they do their 4 steps and 5th steps, things come up from mine.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, things
things that I
don't sneak
forgot.
up. Sure, they pop up. Absolutely.
Right.
I'll
Things I wanted to forget.
I'll be driving along in the car and I'll go, oh boy, that trip. Oh, that wasn't in my inventory. So, right, there's definitely step work always to be done, but you try and be as fearless and thorough as possible.
Right. So, what are some of the keys? You know, as you wrote out the columns, you know, it's how you felt, right, and who it hurt, right. And you know, what were some of the key themes that popped up that were affecting you?
Well, I think for me, and I didn't know it until later, but the process that's spelled out in the big book of taking the 4th step, you know, asks you to ask questions like, what was your motive behind that action? Was it fear? Was it anger? Was it, right? So I was getting in touch with emotions. Glenn, I didn't know how to deal with an emotion, and so I didn't know what fear really was because I drank through fear my whole life. Mm-hmm. My whole life I drank through fear. Wow. So I really didn't know how to process that emotion. So when the step is asking me to identify, is that fear or is it anger? I didn't know. I was like an infant. You know, I heard somebody say the other day that they came into the program, they started drinking at about the age 13, which is very similar to me. I mean, I started a little bit earlier, but, you know, the point is that I stopped maturing at that point. My evolution of an emotional human stopped at 13 years old. So now I'm 60 years old and I'm acting like a 14-year-old, just ask my wife. And, you know, but so I have to get...
That explains it.
Yeah, right. I had to get a real handle on these emotions. So I would say for me, to answer your question, it was grabbing my arms around the emotion of the inventory. The emotion of the inventory. And because I understood the why, I understood the what, I didn't understand the why. And boy, so helpful to me now in my recovery, my daily steps, is to understand where that action is coming from, what emotion is driving that action. Never would have happened without the 4th step. Never would have happened.
Yeah, so the 4th step, I guess, is really the first true action step, right, of something that you have to do.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
And it's probably... You know, for us, it's the first time we're ever really owning up.
Sure.
To a lot of the crap.
Right. And you have 2 choices, either half own up or 100% own up. You know, I vote for 100% own up.
It's just like anything else. You get out of it what you put into it. Right. I call it digging in the dirt. Mm-hmm. You know, the old Peter Gabriel song.
Sure.
You know, and again, it's very important that you don't do it alone.
Right.
You know, to do it with a sponsor, to, you know, consult your sponsor, you know, hey, things that you're proud of, that you're making progress, or things that you're frustrated over, things that you question. You know, you don't, you know, trust yourself, trust your sponsor. Right. You know, again, a lot of faith goes into the steps. And something really important to realize is that, you know, we are more than our mistakes.
Right.
You know, we are not our mistakes, right? We may have made mistakes,
sure we did.
Obviously made mistakes, but that doesn't define who we are as a person.
Made some bad decisions, not a bad person. Right, exactly. The other thing that jumped out at me during my 4th step is that I was able to learn a lot from the community. My sponsor was so valuable to me, I mean, beyond value. But the community of other like-minded individuals that were going through the 4th step was very helpful to me, or those that had went through their 4 steps, whether it was a good experience or a bad experience. Them sharing that experience with me made my life so much easier, because if I was just left with the book and my sponsor, I'd be a bit handicapped. But I had the benefit of going to a bunch of meetings, talking to a bunch of people about the 4th step.
You know, as I look back and as I know more about the 4th step now than those brilliant pieces of work, I think they're in the Smithsonian that I did when I was in rehab. I think, and I'm working with a guy now. He wants to rush through the 4-step. I'm like, dude, you're 1, 2, and 3. The concrete's not really set,
Sure.
right? And going to the 4-step, you can be very vulnerable.
Sure.
And without having some tools to kind of work on it and process it, and it can be scary. And it can. I mean, I've known folks that have drank over their 4-step because they're out there doing it by themselves.
Sure. And I love that word vulnerability. And my suggestion to the next guy is embrace it. Embrace the vulnerability because you'll end up with thicker skin once you understand what's underneath the skin.
Yeah, and as the steps progress, you're really building on each one,
Absolutely.
right? And if you do a weak 4-step, right, if you're not really honest with yourself, or you're leaving stuff off.
That's right.
I was tempted to do that.
Right.
I'm like, I'm not writing that on there.
Somebody might see that.
And so there's, again, it makes sense to do the steps in order. It makes sense to do them methodically, to be honest, to give it everything you've got, and again, with step 4, I kind of wish I had some meaningful, impact, but I kind of wasted that through all my experience. But I love hearing about, how you went about it. And how committed you were to it.
Right. Well, the other thing too, Glenn, is for me, yes, I jumped into the deep end of the 4th step, but the beauty is I'm still in that pool. I'm working with other guys now in the program, and I get to go through the process of the 4th step again. And as you said, things come up, and I can process them. I can put them in their columns. I understand my inventory. I don't want to drink again. That's what the 4th step helps me to never drink again. Never. Big word. I don't want to go there, but I'm going to make it there. Yeah, today.
Well, it's funny, and one of the value, and we'll talk about step 12 when we get to step 12, but having the opportunity and the privilege to work with other alcoholics. I have learned more about this program, about my own alcoholism, about my own sobriety, about tips for success, and how to be okay today. I've learned more from working with others than I have going through it myself. And so you obviously work with others. What's one thing that has popped out as they've worked their 4th step? Is it that fear thing, or is it
I'll tell you the one thing that's really jumped out at me as I continue to work with others that are going through the steps is that there's a lot of great resources out there. After this podcast, just pop on Google and say 4-step worksheet, 4-step conversations, 4-step support. There is so much resources out there. We'll dump
workshops.
Workshops.
Yep. There's 4-step workshops in one weekend. You can bang out your 4-step. And it's super intense.
We should throw some in our library here. We'll throw some 4-step.
That's a great tip. Yeah. So as we wrap up here, my cup's getting cold.
Yeah, right.
So as you wrap up, I got to ask you one question.
Yes.
Did you leave anything off your 4-step?
No, I left nothing off my 4-step. Does new stuff get added to my 4-step? Yes, it does, because I have those moments when I'm driving along and I remember that I forgot.
That makes sense. It's an ongoing process, right?
It is indeed.
And the biggest thing, this whole thing's progress, not perfection.
Progress, not perfection, every day.
All right, brother. Hey, man, I really appreciate you stopping by, opening up about your 4-step. It's a hard one.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's worth it done right.
Experience, strength, and hope.
Yep. Thank you, man.
All right, brother.
Hey, see you next week.
Love you, man.
All right.
Bye.
Love you.
Thanks for joining us for today's coffee chat. To contact the show, email us at podcast@Sober.Coffee. If you need immediate help, the AA hotline is 800-839-1686. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 800-273-8255. Remember, Mike and Glenn are sharing their own journey on the path to recovery. Any suggestions, medical or otherwise, are their own experiences and should not be viewed as professional advice. See you next week, and remember, there is a solution.